If Tottenham Hotspur fire Ange Postecoglou at this point, it shows just how unserious they are about trying to win. And it's not just because Ange and Tottenham won a trophy in the Europa League, it's because of everything and all the decision making that led up to that point. We're going to talk about why that is next, here on Pints and Punditry at the Pitchside Pub. As you can see, we're having a bit of an away fixture ourselves here at the Pitchside Pub. Vacations happen, but news doesn't stop, and there's still plenty to talk about. And one of the news items that may be coming down soon is whether or not Ange Postecoglou is going to remain the manager of Tottenham Hotspur. And the fact that this is even still being discussed shows how terrible the management is at Tottenham Hotspur, mainly Daniel Levy. The fact this is being discussed is utterly incompetent and shows how little they actually care about winning. And it actually has nothing to do with the fact that Ange won the trophy and won the Europa League and finally ended that drought. It's about all the decision making and how they got to that point and the very viable strategy that led to winning the Europa League, but also the poor season in the Premier League. It wasn't by design, and it's not like Ange can coach in Europe and not in England. So we're going to talk about why that is, how we got to this point, and why it makes Daniel Levy and Tottenham so incompetent in just a second. But before we do, go ahead and hit that subscribe button for me down below so you can follow the channel. Get down in the comment section. Let me know your thoughts on Tottenham, on Ange, on Daniel Levy. Should he be out? If so, give me a reason better than 17th in the Premier League, because frankly, it didn't matter. But get in the comments. Let me know your thoughts. You can also leave some comments on Twitter and Blue Sky at Pitchside Pub, and check out the website, pitchsidepub.com. So 17th didn't matter. That was sort of the whole point, and that was the realization that Ange came to after the first few months of the season, which were admittedly disappointing, right? They won a Europa League spot last year, and so there were some expectations, and there was investment in the club, but it was in young players, and it was going to be very tough to really compete for the Premier League title with so much youth. There was also the injuries, and the injuries are tricky because it's not a blank slate to just be bad. Injuries happen. You have to prepare for them. You have to have depth. You have to manage your players. You have to rotate. You can talk about whether Ange's high line style and all the heavy sprinting it requires leads to some more of these hamstring injuries. There is something there, and by no means am I saying that Ange is a wonderful manager and that he's flawless and winning this trophy makes him great and untouchable. None of that is necessarily true. Ange does have some tactical flaws. I think he's a great leader of men. I think the Tottenham locker room and the things they say about him confirm that. They all want him to stay. They love playing for him. Did he get a little grumpy in the media towards the end of the season? Sure, you would be too if you were asked why you stink every week and after every Premier League game. But I think Ange is a good manager, which, who has some technical flaws, and you could argue about that. But none of that matters at this point. The time to fire him for those was a long time ago, and so was the time to fire him for being bad in the Premier League, because at the end of the day, it became a choice. Partway through the season, Ange and his staff realized we're obviously not winning the Premier League. We probably can't even compete for a Champions League spot. Originally top 4, became top 5. They even probably realized they couldn't even get a Europe spot. Couldn't even get a top 8 in the Europa League or the Conference League because of a poor start, partly due to injuries, partly due to just poor play. But once that happened, they had a choice to make. And these things have to come from the top down. It should have involved Daniel Levy. I assume it did. But these are club-wide, height, top to bottom type decisions that have to be incorporated. And at some point, Ange said, listen, we can't compete on both fronts. We don't have the players. Too many guys are hurt. We don't have enough depth. We can't do both. So we have a choice. Try to remain competent in the Premier League and play our best players there and have to rotate out for the Europa League, maybe more than we'd like to. Not just 1 or 2 players, but a lot of players, so that we don't have more injuries that we can't sustain. But in doing so, we may lose in the Europa League. We may lose to a club that we really should beat. Do we want to do that just to make sure we don't finish 17th, but to try and finish 10th or 12th instead? Because at this point, you are recognizing you're only having these conversations if you've decided Europe is probably out of the question. They were right to decide that. So they realized that that was out of the question and said, no, the difference between 9th and 17th does not matter. And you know what? People don't want to hear that. That's hard for fans because that means a lot of bad football. That means a lot of getting your butt kicked against rivals in the Premier League. But they are correct. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean a damn thing. It means a few more dollars in the pocket of the owner. Maybe they can spend a little bit more on the transfer market, but really not that much. The difference is negligible in terms when you compare it to winning a trophy, which is supposed to be the whole point, and nabbing that Champions League spot that comes with winning that trophy, which they no longer had any chance at in the Premier League. So they went all in. And I don't know how that decision was made, but I'm sure Ange was on board with it because he's the one that was going to have to execute it. And he's the one that was going to have to go answer the questions as to why their Premier League form was so bad and be the front-facing person. Now, if Daniel Levy had a problem with that, you could understand that. I think it's wrong. I think the strategy that they took was correct, but I would understand a manager, a general manager, a president, a club president, having a problem with that and not wanting to look that bad. Again, I think it's short term, I think it's short-sighted, but I'd at least understand that. But if he did have a problem with that, if he didn't like the, punting the Premier League and going all in for the Europa League strategy, the time to fire Ange Postecoglou was in December or January or February or whenever they really made that decision. That had to have been something that was discussed. Or at the very least, if Ange just started doing it, at some point Daniel Levy has to come down from the press box and go, hey, Skip, what are we doing? You're getting killed here in the Premier League every week because you're playing a lot of the backups, and then we're playing all the starters in Europe. That's not what I want to do here. That had to have been a conversation. If Daniel Levy had a problem with that, at some point it had to have been addressed. And Ange could have said, tough, I'm the manager, that's what I'm doing. Or he could have said, okay, boss, I'll do what you want to do. That doesn't strike me as Ange. It strikes me that he would just go, screw you, I'm going to do this my way or I'm going to quit. And then they would have fired him at that time where he would have resigned. I would have understood that. You wouldn't have had a hard time justifying firing him at that point for their place in the table. But if he was going to do this strategy, if that was against the will of Daniel Levy, the time to fire him for it was months ago. And frankly, the strategy worked. Now, Ange should not be kept around because the strategy worked. The strategy is the strategy. If that wasn't what Daniel Levy wanted, he should have fired him a long time ago. Winning the trophy doesn't change anything. Ange is no better manager today with that trophy than he was a couple weeks ago before he had it. One game to Manchester United doesn't change that. Just like Ruben Amorim didn't become any worse of a manager because he lost that final to Ange and Tottenham than he was going into it. One game and the results of one game do not change anything. And I know it's a results-based business, but it shouldn't be, not by as much as it is. You got to factor in results, but they are factored in far too much. Just like Ange shouldn't be saved because he won the trophy. The argument should not be, you can't fire Ange now, he won a trophy. Well, that's reactionary. Just like you shouldn't be saying, well, he should get sacked because he finished 17th. That was a choice. It became evident that they couldn't win both. They couldn't compete at both. A top 4 or 5 finish and winning the Europa League was not in the cards. You can argue all day about whose fault that is, but nevertheless, that was the position they found themselves in. And Ange said, okay, mate, we're going to go for the trophy. I'm going to win things because that's what I do. He had the ridiculous quote about in the second year he wins things, and he went to back it up. And I like that strategy. I get it. But whether you like it or not, if Daniel Levy had a problem with it, the time to fire him was when that happened. And that's when he should have been sacked. To do it now, after winning a trophy, is not only a bad look and terrible optics for a fan base that finally has something to cheer about. After being the hapless losers for so long, they finally have some positivity, and you're going to fire the guy who brought it to you? What terrible optics are that? But it's not about optics, it's about the decision making. And if you okay that strategy all season and basically tank your Premier League season and finish 17th, just above relegation, which, by the way, at no point was that ever in play. Relegation was never in play. That was never actually going to happen. But if you let that happen all season and the plan worked, and then you fire the guy that executed it, your decision-making is completely illogical. And it just goes to show you that all you really care about is some credibility, saving face, and getting that top 4 finish. You clearly don't even care about getting into the Champions League because the guy managed to do that when you had no real business doing it. So you really just care about saving face, being one of the big six clubs and finishing in one of those top couple of spots. And that is just mismanagement at its finest. So firing him now would be totally devoid of any logical continuity, and it's not because he won. It's because of the decision that was made to go for it. And whether he won that, whether that strategy paid dividends or not, that was the strategy he signed off on, and that had to be the strategy that management okayed. And if they let him do that and then fire him when it works, it just shows you how little clue Daniel Levy and Tottenham Hotspur have on how to compete and how to be a winning club. What do you think? Get down in that comment section. Let me know your thoughts on Ange, on Daniel Levy, on this decision. If you want him fired, I'll listen, but give me something better than, oh, they finished 17th, because that was basically by choice. But get down in that comment section. Let me know your thoughts. You can also leave some comments on Twitter and Blue Sky at Pitchside Pub. While you're at it, hit that subscribe button for me down below so you can follow the channel, and check out the website pitchsidepub.com. Thanks as always for joining us here on Pints and Punditry at the Pitchside Pub.